Next, we're going to hear from the brilliant Helen Razer, broadcaster, writer, commentator. Her fifth book, A Short History of Stupid, with Bernard Keane, remains a bestseller and was recently nominated for the New South Wales State Library's inaugural Russell Prize. Helen Razer.
Thank you, Dar. I believe in gardening. I believe in comfortable pants. I believe in a life after love. Sorry, always wanted to do that in here. And I believe it's worth participating in any event that unites us in a topic inspired by the music of Cher. I believe that belief is, like the great artist Cher herself, something best examined with great care and in its naked state. When I was fairly young, I visited a psychologist, I know, surprising, who suggested to me that the purpose of adulthood was to undo the pain and the belief of childhood. After this, I never saw her again because she was very depressing and probably in more need of urgent emotional repair than even me or Cher. She was very painful, but very wise to say that to get better is to undo yourself and to undo your belief. To think about who we are and what we believe is only one half as interesting and maybe about a tenth as useful as the act of overcoming both. I don't want to believe things. I want to unbelieve. So being an aspiring unbeliever, I suspect that if there's a purpose to the individual life, it's probably to overcome the trauma of birth and then maybe get ready to die. I suspect if there is a purpose to the custody of a rational mind, it is to work out why we've filled so much of it with so much shit. To clear my head of the rot of belief, to clear my childhood of faith and my adult life of ideology strikes me as perhaps the only meaningful plan. So what I believe now is that from now until the point of my death, I'll keep asking myself the question, what do I believe? And I'll keep failing to answer it. And I'll comfort myself with the depressing advice, try again, fail better, which you probably know comes to us from Beckett, truly the Yoda of modernism. It sounds hopeless, but it's not really a hopeless position. To say that you aspire to strip yourself of belief is not the same thing as saying that you believe in nothing, because if you believe in doubt, then you believe in a very substantial something. It's when doubt becomes a method, science, that we fly to the moon. Doubt is the rocket that gets us up there, which is very different from denialism, whose engine runs on fear and brown coal. Doubt is to clear your ears of centuries of obstruction, and denialism is just to put your finger in your ears and say, la, 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 la. And I know that I actually have that tendency, and I suspect that many people have this tendency because there's really no more comfortable place for our fingers than our ears. And even if we champion wind farms and we say that war is bad and we talk about inequality or the urgent need for human rights, we can still be beset by unexamined belief as much as the next Prime Minister. It's very easy to say that some people are naive or have false consciousness or are ideological or are crushing douche canoes that had their brains replaced with a copy of That's Life magazine and some spare change. And of course, some people are especially gifted in the art of intellectual inertia. And every now and then you hear somebody say something of such logical stasis, you might think they need the hospital, even more than me or Cher. In fact, our Prime Minister said something like this, surprising, I know, just last week when he offered that Islamic State, whom he curiously seeks to dishonour by using their Arabic initials, was worse than Hitler's systematised massacre of millions, because, and this is a verbatim quote, in the newspaper this week, the Nazis did terrible evil, but they had sufficient sense of shame to try and hide it. You didn't read that? So you read that, and it's very hard not to feel stricken. Tony Abbott seems to think, unlike the overwhelming majority of criminal justice professionals, that the careful concealment of murder on this scale, so frightening to the world precisely because it was efficiently bureaucratic and hidden, is somehow less worse and not a cause, in fact, for a more serious sentence. So, yeah, idiocy, right? And it's quite easy to find fault with Tony Abbott. And in fact, he's lately become the kind of ideologue who is so stupidly sincere in his idiocy, there's no more need for satirists. Abbott, to be clear, here's a joke we prepared earlier. You know? It's like the worst of the Chicago School of Economics got together with the least holy people in Mother Church, you know? And it's funny, ha ha ha, Tony Abbott's an idiot, you know? Look at him and his unexamined belief. How can even an OMFG, we are so much better than that. Sometimes I think maybe I'm not better than that though. Perhaps it's a disorder that I should have had corrected long ago before I left the psychologist's office. But no, I actually sometimes suspect that I'm not better than that I'm trapped in belief. I suspect that I tend to harmful belief. I mean, obviously, my grasp of history and your grasp of ethics is slightly more firm than the Prime Minister's in that we're able to probably see that a cool-headed mass murder machine whose cogs mesh quietly and fatally to the most efficient rhythms in history are probably pretty bad. And no, we don't think that the present Australian government is made better by the shame, at least the shame that drives them to hide what they're doing in Nauru, Manus and the ongoing NT intervention. We would think that that makes them worse. But this aside, this obvious evidence that Abbott is an ideologue or a very sincere believer aside, can I say that my own sincerity and my own belief is that much better? Like most of us, I saw those pictures of the little toddler, Aileen Curdy, and the little chap who, in fleeing Syria, drowned in the Aegean. And like most of them, I couldn't look at them, and then I couldn't not look at them. And then I thought, as the news agencies who distributed this picture knew that I would, that war is stupid and save the children and so on. And of course, war is stupid. And of course, it would be nice if stupid war could become just enough that at the very least little boys are spared from knowing this sea as anything more than a place to have a holiday or a place for wonderful stories of Homer's fictitious monsters. And why did the real monsters from the West fail to deliver this baby from a conflict they'd created over centuries? And I thought of all of these things, as I imagine many of us did. There are many, many terrible things about that terrible picture, but just one of them is the terrible reminder of belief. And this is a belief that is reflected in a headline from The Guardian today, which is, "This one small life has told us how to tackle the refugee crisis." No, it doesn't tell us that. But this is what many of us, including myself, permit ourselves in instance to believe. We believe that this death, of all the deaths, including presumably those that occurred in the region between the wars due to the humanitarian sanctions of the Clinton administration, is the one suddenly that will fix everything. Little Ireland's death, we tell ourselves, will be the one, finally, that will deliver us from centuries of killing. Like Kim Phuc, the 9-year-old Vietnamese girl stripped of her clothes and of her skin by napalm in 1972 in that famous picture that won the Pulitzer Prize. Aileen will finally be the one to remind us of our humanity. Today, this is the moment we undo the Crusades. And this is the moment that we rewrite Sykes-Picot. And this is the moment where we rethink the entire idea of the nation state and come to terms with our culpability as the writers of maps, the butchers of children and the masters of war. But it's not. This is the moment where we feed ourselves belief. And this belief, not very far away from the language of BuzzFeed, which tells us this one emotional video will change the world, is that our humanity will change the world. Well, it won't. This belief in ourselves and our ability to see that all lives matter is not enough. And I know this because I've lived sufficiently long to see similar moments that are cathartic for us to play out to ourselves. We see these pictures and we congratulate ourselves on our emotional response, and we say that things will change because we're so emotional and things don't change. And we'll go back to hiding death. And one way that we hide death, because we have the shame to hide it, is to reveal occasional spectacular deaths. Half a million babies died in Iraq from sanctions. And when Madeleine Albright was asked on 60 Minutes, was it worth it? She said, I think the price was worth it. So we can see a member of an administration we now remember fondly, and we can see what the courageous Chelsea Manning gave the world, and we can learn about the hundreds of children in Yemen and Pakistan killed by drone strikes. And we can still tell ourselves that this is the moment, this one that we saw this week is the moment of clear brutality, will be the one that saves us, because finally we can see that human lives matter. We can't continue to believe in the power of our own humanity. We can't continue to tell ourselves that this one inspiring photograph and a lifetime of them will change the world. We can't pretend that we understand Syria. Humanity, which is a founding myth of Western culture, and one that arose in concert with Western colonisation and is still upheld by all the world's major liberal institutions, is not the answer. Crying with a kind of catharsis at the open brutality of this war is not an emotion, is an emotional response, but it's still a belief. And it's a belief not very far away from Tony Abbott's, who tells us that the evil things are the ones that we can see. Our view of evil is not less obstructed today because we've feasted on this photograph. We still have our fingers in our ears. We're still singing the hymn of belief in ourselves and our humanity, even as we grieve and even as we mean well, and we do mean well. But our love is not going to save 500,000 children, and our humanity, which has been formalised for years to little effect in our global liberal institutions, is a belief. The way out of this is not through a Western myth of tolerance and love and togetherness. It's through long, tedious reparations to a region we've starved, made illiterate, bombed, and forced them into radical modes of survival. One whose jihadi pamphlets we printed, whose terrorists we trained, whose most reviled organisations we were, until very recent history, funding. Abbott, who said these things about Nazis, probably never read Hannah Arendt, who famously described the Holocausts in the famous terms, you've heard it, the banality of evil. The real terror of modern evil is that it becomes so every day. And this too is the real terror of modern good. Modern good takes time, it takes commitment, it takes programs of education, immunisation, housing, agriculture, all this stuff, all this boring stuff. And what it does not take is another moment of belief in ourselves as humanitarian saviours. The belief that our love is powerful is very powerful, but Oprah, Tony, even you, Cher, it's time to give it a rest. Thank you.